Hello guys, welcome back for another video in Microsoft Flight Simulator and part 2 of my tutorials in the PMDG 777-300ER. And for today we're going to be focusing on our descent, approach and landing into London Heathrow on our flight from Paris. And if you did miss part 1 of my guide, go check that out. I'll put a link in the description below where we went over setting up the aircraft from cold and dark to pretty much where we are now. And we've currently reached our cruise altitude of 28,000 feet and we're about to leave France, cross the British Channel, and then we can begin our descent down into London Heathrow. And as you can see, it's an absolutely beautiful day. Look at that. So without further ado, let's hop inside the flight deck and get started. Okay then, so if we take a look at our nav display, we can see we're just approaching our top of descent marker, which is 22 miles. So let's start off by going into our VNav page and we will load in our descent forecast. So scroll across to page 3 and then hit the forecast button on the right hand side, and then we can click load because we loaded that in on the ground in Paris. If you haven't done that, you can click the request forecast button there. So that's all our descent winds loaded in. And then what we're going to do is come down to our NavRad page, so click the NavRad button and we'll just double check the VORs are both tuned to the Biggin Hill VOR, which is shown on the nav display by the green arrows, and we're 86 miles to go on both left and right VORs, so that's fine. And our ILS is also auto-tuned to runway 27 right, which is what we're expecting into Heathrow today. So if we come over to our tablet and click on the charts, we can see we've got our 27 right chart on screen, and if we just zoom in a little bit, you can see there the frequency is 110.3 at 269 degrees, and that matches up with what we've got in our NavRad page, so that's all fine. Moving on then, there's a bit of a flow that I like to go through for our descent, and if we take a look at the PFD, in the top left our ILS frequency is all tuned and ready to go. And next we're going to look at our approach references for our landing. So if we come over to the EFB and we click on our performance tool, and then we're going to click landing en route, and we're going to select runway 27 right, and that gives us all our runway information. It's dry, so we can import our weights from the aircraft. Flaps 30, auto brakes 3, and we're going to have a +5 on the VREF. Import our weather, QNH 1013, and we're going to hit the green calculate button, and that gives us our VREF of 143 knots and also our required landing distance, which is all fine. Okay, so what we're going to do is click the init ref button, and on our approach ref we're going to select the 30 degrees flaps 138 knots, which pops it in the scratch pad, and then we can add that in bottom right there. We're just getting the reset MCP altitude message, so that means we're pretty close to top of descent. So we'll pop in our lowest altitude, which is going to be 2,500 feet. Let's just scroll that in there, 2,500, thank you. Which means the plane will just automatically start its descent as we pass over the top of descent marker. And if we just check the charts, there we go, there's our 2,500 feet where we're going to intercept our ILS down onto runway 27 right. And whilst we're here, let's have a look at our minimums. So we've got 178 feet on the barrow, so we can also put that in. So up to the barrow then, and we'll scroll that left all the way down to 178 feet. Always a bit tricky on this dial, but we'll get there. 175, 178. So that is our minimums set. And on the bottom left hand side we can also see our approach ref, flaps 30, 138 knots plus R5, which gives us the 143. Okay, we are getting there. So next we're going to set our altimeter for our approach into Heathrow. So let's check the arrival weather. We've got a QNH 1013, which we can pre-select on the altimeter, so it's going to be a bit difficult for you guys to see, but it'll appear just below the standard pressure on the PFD. And there we go, 1013 is pre-selected. Then when we click from standard pressure to local pressure, that will automatically load in. And whilst that's all been happening, I've neglected to point out that we have started our descent. Now we've got our vertical deviation bar there on the right of the nav display, and we've got our little magenta triangle showing that we're bang on profile, and we're sort of descending at a nice steady 1600 feet per minute at the moment, so that's all looking good. And the final part of my flow that I like to do is we're going to add a fix around our runway 27 right. So if you select that, it will drop it in the scratch pad, then hit the fix button and we can add it to the top left. And then we're going to add a fix at 5 miles, so we key in /5, and we're going to have a fix ring at 10 miles, so /10, and we'll drop that in. And there we go, that is our fixes added. It's going to be again a bit tricky for you to see because we're quite far out, but if I change the range on the nav display, there we go, you can just see those little green rings there as what we've added in, and that just acts as a nice little reminder for me as we're on final approach and I'm working my way through our flap schedule. So okay, now let's keep our heading bug aligned. I always forget that in the Boeing, so just scroll that round to our current heading of 314 degrees. Right, that is us pretty much configured for our descent then. Let's have a bit of a recap. If we take a closer look at the PFD, if you remember, I worked a bit of a flow in an L shape around the PFD. So top left our ILS frequency is tuned in, and then bottom left our approach ref, and bottom right we set our minimums and also pre-tuned our altimeters. And then we just added a couple of fixes as well to our runway. And that is pretty much it. So now is a good time to run our descent checklist. So if we hit the checklist button and we can do a quick recall, it's checked, notes are checked, auto brake is going to be set to 3 as per our landing calculations. Our landing data, VREF and minimums we've been through already, so that is checked. And finally we need to brief our approach. So go back to the EFB and get our charts on screen, and we'll just come out of our approach chart and we'll load our arrival, which is the LSO1 hotel. And if we just zoom in a little bit and go full screen, you can see our little blue plane there. We've just passed over LSO and we're on a course of 314 degrees to ETVAX, where we need to be at flight level 180. So if we double check the FMC, we can see that all marries up with the chart, so that's fine. And then from there we will turn left on an inbound course of 316 degrees to the Biggin Hill VOR, where we need to be max 220 knots and flight level 70. Again, if we just double check the FMC, we can see that max 220 knots and flight level 70. So that's all fine for our arrival. So from Biggin Hill then we need to open up a slightly different chart which just shows our final approach. And we're going to be inbound 272 degrees with a max 180 knots before turning right 091 degrees at or above 6,000 feet. Then we're going to turn left at or above 3,500 feet on an inbound course of 269 degrees, where we will intercept our glide slope at 2,500 feet and down onto runway 27 right. And that is our arrival briefed. If I get our approach chart back on screen, we'll just have another look at that. And let's just zoom in again. So as I said, we'll be inbound on a course of 269 degrees, where we will intercept our glide slope at 2,500, and we've got a runway elevation of 78 feet. Minimums are all set, so that was 178 feet. So let's brief our missed approach then. Climb straight ahead when passing 1580 feet or delta 0.0 IIR, whichever is later. Climbing turn right on track 316 degrees to 3,000 feet. So that's going to be our missed approach altitude, then as directed. And that is our approach briefing complete. Let's get our arrival chart back up just so we can monitor our progress. As you can see, we're just passing over our Rotno waypoint, so that's all looking fine. And let's have a quick look outside, and as you can see, we are just about to pass over the fantastic Kent coastline, so not too much further to go now, and it's actually really calm down there as well, so that makes things a bit easier for us. Okay, then let's have a little bit of a monitor of our descent. So let's zoom in on our PFD. So we're, as you can see, just through 20,000 feet, descending at a nice steady 1,500 feet per minute. We're bang on profile. We're just passing our ETVAX waypoint where we needed to be at 18,000 feet, so we're going to make that okay. We're about 33 miles from Biggin Hill. Vertical deviation is fine, and we can actually just see our Biggin Hill VOR coming in at the top of the nav display there, so that's all fine. So that is everything pretty much set up for the descent and configured for our approach, so we can complete our descent checklist now. So let's come down to do that. There we go. So our approach briefing is checked, and that is our descent checklist complete. So if we press the button twice, it brings up our next checklist, which is our approach. Okay, so we'll break off there for a bit and do a bit of sightseeing, and we'll catch up again when we're ready to configure the plane for our approach. Okay, welcome back to the flight deck. You join us just as we're approaching 10 DME to our Biggin Hill VOR, and we're about to pass through 10,000 feet. So overhead then, and we can turn our landing lights on, our runway turn off lights on, and we'll get the kids sitting down in the back. So seatbelt signs on. So on our charts, we're about to pass our Biggin Hill VOR, so let's change that chart for our initial approach from Biggin Hill, just so we can monitor. There we are, the little blue plane at the edge of the chart there, so we can monitor our approach in to runway 27 right. And if we look at the top of our nav display, we can just see the first of my fix rings appearing. So the 10-mile fix is just appearing in the top of the nav display now. In fact, if we zoom out, we can see both of them there, so that's a bit clearer than it was earlier. So that will just give us some indication of when we need to be selecting various flaps for our arrival. Okay, we're a little bit high on profile, so I'm just going to deploy the speed brake for a little while. It's really effective on the 777, just so we can reduce our energy and get ourselves back on profile a bit better. And let's also put our next heading of 272 degrees into the window so we're ready for our turn. Just keep ahead of the plane. Let's wind that all the way in. 290, 280 and 272. And that little chime is to let us know that the cabin is ready, and we get a little memo on screen to confirm that. And I am actually going to keep the speed brake deployed for a little bit longer. We're still a touch high on profile, just showing there on our nav display. So yeah, we'll leave that on for a little while longer. And if we come over to the first officer's window, we should be able to get our first glimpse of London through the clouds. There she is. Beautiful. Right, let's go ahead and retract our speed brake then. And we're just approaching our first turn now. What I'm going to do is engage our first stage of flaps as we turn in right, and we'll get confirmation that on our display there as well. Okay, so we are through our transition altitude now as well, so we can flip from standard pressure to local pressure, and you will see the altitude drop when I hit that button. There we go. So we're now in local pressure, and we'll just start turning our heading bug in readiness for our right turn. And our vertical profile is also starting to come back to where we need it, so that's all good. And we are about to start our turn in right, so I'll engage our first stage of flaps. We'll go flaps 1. And our flaps indicator is now on screen and showing flaps 1. So I'm going to take manual control of our speed now, and we're going to bug the flap speed basically. So I'll just dial that in till the little pink box is round our flap 1 position. And if we take a quick look at our charts, we can see our little blue plane turning in quite nicely right now. So let's add our next heading of 091 degrees into the window. Just keep scrolling that round. 70, 80, come on, 091, set. You can just see the Thames winding through the city there. And we've just about completed our right hand turn onto our outbound leg of 091 degrees. And what I'm going to do is, when we start turning back in left to intercept our runway centreline, we'll go flaps 5 at that point. And also, as we've now changed to local pressure, we can complete our approach checklist because our altimeters are set, so we will check those, and that is our approach checklist complete. So double click on the checklist button, and that brings up our landing checklist. And we need to arm our speed brakes, so that's checked. And then we've just got to lower our landing gear, and gives us our reference flaps 30 as well. So we'll just monitor that as we turn in. And as I mentioned, at that point we will also go flaps 5. And we can also start bringing our heading bug round to intercept our runway centreline as we turn in left. And we'll go flaps 5, and again just check our centre display to make sure we've engaged the right flap, and we'll also bug that flap speed again as well. Move our magenta box down to the flap 5 position, and that'll just be a nice smooth and steady 180 knots for our turn. And let's just finish bringing our heading bug round to our final inbound course of 269 degrees, which is basically our runway course. So just keep that scrolling round. 275. There we go, 269 degrees set. And we can also now bring up our final approach chart and just monitor our position. There we are, just turning in now, ready to intercept our glide slope. And before the plane intercepts the ILS frequency, we need to make sure that approach mode is set. So we'll engage approach mode just as we're turning onto the runway centreline. We've got a really good view of the city now, flying directly overhead. Such a cool approach into Heathrow from Biggin Hill, I have to say. In fact, if we take a bit of a closer look through, we can see the London Eye, Houses of Parliament, all that good stuff as the Thames winds through the city. Right, that's enough sightseeing. Let's get our approach mode engaged. And we'll go flaps 15. And once again we'll match our flap speed, so we'll wind that down to the flap 15 position on our speed tape. And we're now approaching our 10-mile fix, and we have visual on our runway. And once we pass over that fix, we will go gear down. And we'll just bug our speed to 160 knots. That's fairly standard practice to remain at 160 knots until you get to about 4 or 5 DME from the runway, so we'll keep our speed nice and steady at 160. and we can just see our magenta diamonds on the PFD coming down into position to intercept our glide slope. And we'll go gear down. Here it comes. Look at that. Sensational. It's actually incredible what PMDG have managed to create with this aircraft. It is absolutely magnificent, honestly. So on our landing checklist then, that is gear down and checked. And on the PFD we can now see our glide slope is captured, so we can add our missed approach altitude into the window, which was 3,000 feet. Check. And we'll go flaps 20. And this time we're just going to maintain our 160 knots until we pass over that 5-mile fix that we see on our nav display. Runway 27 right, really clear in front of us now. Okay, I'm going to go flaps 25, and I'm also going to wind in our final approach ref, which was 138 knots plus 5, which gives us the 143 set. Engine's just spooling up as well to keep us at our VREF speed. Just under 1500 to go then. And if we take a closer look at the PFD, we've got land 3 mode, rollout and flare, which basically means we're all configured for an auto landing if required, but I'm going to hand fly it just as we're through 1,000 feet. And we'll go to our final stage of flaps, flaps 30. And there we go, our flaps are fully extended, and that is our landing checklist complete. Okay. As I mentioned, as we pass through 1,000 feet, I will disengage the autopilot and hand fly our landing. So autopilot disengaged then, and my controls. We don't need to turn off the auto throttle in the 777. As we enter our flare, the plane will automatically close the thrust levers. Then all we've got to do is get our reversers on and concentrate on driving in a straight line, basically. 400 to go. Eyes fixed on our flight directors.
300.
200 to go.
Approaching minimums.
Now focusing on the touchdown zone.
100. Minimums.
Continue and looking to the end of the runway.
20. 10.
Flare. And touchdown. Reverse green. Whoop. Little kink left. Hug that centre line. Auto brake's doing a great job as well. And manual braking. Okay folks, welcome to London Heathrow. We will vacate at this next exit here. And let's just drop the tablet down so we can see what we're doing. Here we go. Okay, so that concludes today's video on managing our descent, approach and landing in the PMDG 777-300ER. I hope you found the video useful, maybe you learnt something new. If you did, give it a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.